The wine surged through my veins like liquid fire, burning more from humiliation than from alcohol. His words still hung in the air, heavy, undeniable, cruel. My son deserves better than someone from the gutter. At that moment, everything around me blurred. The glittering chandelier above the polished laughter of the guests, the clinking of forks against porcelain plates, all of it dissolved into a muffled haze. My fingernails curled into my palms, leaving small half-moons of pain as though anchoring me to reality. William Harrington. Quinn's father stood like a man declaring law, his voice somehow both muffled and painfully sharp, each syllable slicing into my skin. Street garbage, he called me, and my name dissolved under the weight of his contempt. My dress, borrowed from a designer friend, suddenly felt like a costume, a flimsy disguise I had no right to wear. Every eye turned to me, 23 pairs to be exact. They shifted between William and me, eager for blood, for scandal, for the downfall of the woman who had dared to step into the kingdom of old money with nothing but grit and survival to her name. I folded the napkin with painstaking care, its fabric smoother than anything I had ever owned. My plate sat untouched, the salmon glistening under soft golden light. My throat burned, but I forced a calm smile as I pushed the napkin to the side. "Thank you for dinner, Mr. Harrington," I said, rising slowly, my chair scraping against the polished floor. My voice didn't shake, though my heart pounded with violent force. "And thank you for finally being honest. My name is Zafira Cross. I am 32 years old, a woman who built everything with her own hands, every penny, every piece of credibility, every fragile shard of dignity. That night, in front of a table of strangers who would dine on my humiliation, I vowed this: no one would ever mistake me for garbage again." Quinn's hand shot out, trembling, desperate to stop me. "Zafira, don't," he whispered, his voice breaking. I squeezed his hand gently, felt the warmth of his skin, the sincerity in his fear. But I let go. "It's fine, love. Your father's right," I whispered. "I should know my place." The smirk that curved William's lips branded itself into my memory. It was the look of a man who believed he had won, that his throne was safe, that his son's heart and my spirit could be crushed with one insult. He thought his contempt would banish me, reduce me back to the shadows. He had no idea that the woman he called trash had risen from shadows darker than any he could imagine and learned to thrive there. I walked out of that dining room with my head held high, past the Monet painting displayed carelessly in the hallway, past the servants trained to avoid eye contact, past the Bentley William had boasted about, loud enough to remind me it cost more than I would ever make in 5 years. I left that house of marble and glass like a queen stripped bare but unbroken. Outside, Quinn caught up to me by my modest Toyota, the same car William had sneered at when I pulled into their circular driveway. His tears cut through me. He was trembling, his perfect composure shattered. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice fractured. "I had no idea he would—" I pulled him into my arms, inhaling the faint cologne mixed with the salt of grief. My voice was soft but firm. "This isn't your fault. Don't you dare carry his sins." "I'll talk to him. I'll make him apologize," he pleaded. "No." I tucked a strand of his dark hair behind his ear, a small gesture of tenderness in the chaos. "No more apologies for him. No more excuses." He finally said out loud what he's thought all along. "At least now we know the truth." Quinn's eyes filled again. "Zafira, please don't let him ruin us." "He can't ruin what's real," I whispered, pressing my lips to his forehead. "I'll call you tomorrow. I promise." He nodded, broken, reluctant. I drove away, watching the Harrington mansion shrink in my rearview mirror, its golden lights flickering like stars in a sky that had never belonged to me. My phone buzzed incessantly. His mother, his sister, people who wanted to smooth things over. They weren't bad people, just weak ones chained by fear to William's reign. But I wasn't like them. Weakness had been bled out of me long ago. I voice-dialed my assistant. "Danielle, I know it's late." Her concern carried through the line. "Miss Cross, is everything all right?" Danielle had been with me for 6 years, through every battle, through every scar I collected in the war of survival. "Cancel the Harrington merger," I said flatly. Silence stretched. Then her voice strained. "Ma'am, we're supposed to sign Monday. Due diligence is complete. Financing is secured. This is a $2 billion deal." "I'm aware. Kill it." The termination fees alone. I don't care about the fees. Send the notice tonight. Cite irreconcilable differences in culture and vision. Her voice broke its usual professionalism. Zafira. She only dropped the formality when she feared I was walking into fire. This is a $2 billion deal. He called me garbage Danielle, in front of a room full of his peers. He made it clear I'll never be good enough, not for his family, not for his business. Let him live with that arrogance. I could hear her fingers flying across her keyboard. I'll draft the termination papers within the hour. Do you want me to leak it to the press? Not yet, I said coldly. Let him wake up to the official notice first. We'll give the media their feast by noon tomorrow. Her voice hardened, with pleasure. Anything else? Yes. Set up a meeting with Fairchild Corporation for Monday. If Harrington Industries won't sell, maybe their biggest competitor will. A pause. You're going to buy his rival. Why not? I whispered with venom. Garbage has to stick together, right? I hung up and drove in silence, city lights flashing like reminders of how far I had come. I was not the girl who once slept in shelters, who stood in cafeteria lines with a paper ticket for free lunches. I was a woman who had clawed her way up brick by brick into power. William Harrington thought he knew me because he knew my past. He thought poor was permanent. He thought survival scars made me less. He had no idea those scars were my armor. By the time I reached my penthouse, my phone was buzzing again, this time with Harrington's CFO, Martin Keating. There must be some mistake, he stammered. No mistake, I replied. Ask William why. And I ended the call. That night, on my balcony, overlooking a city that never pitied me, I poured a glass of scotch and let the bitterness dissolve into fire. Somewhere, William was learning the cost of contempt. I wondered if he would connect the dots tonight or tomorrow, but it didn't matter. He would learn in time that the garbage he dismissed controlled the one thing his empire needed to breathe. By morning, I had 47 missed calls. 6 were from William himself. The great William Harrington, reduced to chasing the voice of a woman he called trash. As I sipped my coffee, Danielle called. Bloomberg wants a statement. The press got wind of the terminated merger. Tell them Cross Technologies is exploring opportunities that better align with our values and vision. She laughed softly, vague, devastating. I love it. Also, William Harrington is in the lobby. I nearly spit out my coffee. He's here. Yes, security hasn't let him up, but he's making quite a scene. Should I have him removed? I smiled, cold and deliberate. No, send him to conference room C. Make him wait. I'll finish breakfast. You're evil, Danielle teased, though her voice carried pride. And so 45 minutes later, I walked into the conference room where William sat, stripped of his arrogance. His perfect suit wrinkled his face, etched with desperation. He stood when I entered. Zafira, thank you for seeing me. I sat down without shaking his hand. You have 5 minutes. He swallowed his pride, tasting like glass. I apologize for last night. My words were inappropriate. Inappropriate, I laughed bitterly. You called me garbage in front of your entire circle. That wasn't inappropriate. That was honesty. His jaw tightened. What do you want, an apology? You have it. A public statement, I'll make one. Just the merger needs to happen. You know it does. I leaned in, eyes burning into his. Why? Why should I give my life's work to a man who disrespects me? Silence stretched. His answer came weak, desperate. Because it's business. It's not personal. No, I whispered. Everything is personal when you make it personal. And for the first time, William Harrington realized that his kingdom was already crumbling. His words echoed in my mind even as he sat there across from me, stripped of his authority. Because it's business. It's not personal. But everything in my life had always been personal. Business was never just business to me. It was survival, breath, dignity. He couldn't understand that because he had never been hungry, never slept in a shelter bed where the springs poked through like accusations, never felt the cold silence of being invisible to the world. I leaned back in the chair watching him squirm. His suit, which had been perfectly tailored just the night before, looked rumpled. His tie loosened as though oxygen itself had turned against him. You researched me, didn't you, William? I asked softly. You dug into my background. You know I grew up in foster homes. You know about the free lunch programs. You know I worked warehouse night shifts to pay for textbooks. He nodded reluctantly, eyes narrowing like a man admitting a crime only because he'd been caught. But you stopped there, I continued. You thought those details defined me. You saw where I came from and assumed that was the whole story. You never bothered to ask where I was going. My voice cracked with emotion, but not weakness. It was the tremor of truth breaking through years of silence. He tried to respond, but I raised a hand to stop him. My mind was already drifting backward, pulled into the darkness of memory. I was 13 when I first realized the world had no safety net. My foster mother at the time, a woman named Lorraine, told me we couldn't afford new shoes for school. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at my sneakers holes in the toes soles flapping with every step, and understanding in that moment that there was no one coming to save me. No doting father, no protective mother, no inheritance, no family name, just me. I began working odd jobs, babysitting, sweeping hair at the salon, scrubbing dishes until my hands ached, and the smell of bleach clung to my skin. Every dollar I earned was proof that I was more than what people assumed I was. Every coin saved was a rebellion against the fate the world tried to hand me. By 16, I was stacking shelves at a grocery store after school, pretending not to notice when my classmates from the better neighborhoods walked past laughing, pretending they didn't see me in my apron. Their parents drove luxury cars, their weekends filled with ski trips or summer homes. I couldn't even afford the school yearbook photo fee. At 18, I was accepted to community college, but even then it was survival disguised as ambition. I worked nights stocking warehouses with boxes that weighed more than I did. I drank coffee until my hands shook, then studied until dawn. When my classmates complained about cafeteria food, I thought about the nights I had gone to bed with nothing but tap water. All of that, every humiliating day, every blister, every ache. It wasn't just a chapter in my story. It was the foundation of who I became. So when William Harrington dared to call me garbage, he wasn't just insulting me. He was insulting every version of myself I had fought to keep alive. He was insulting the girl who had no shoes, the young woman who worked until her fingers bled, the survivor who refused to disappear. I snapped back to the present, meeting his gaze again. "Do you know why Cross Technologies succeeded?" William Thirst asked. "Because you have good products," he muttered. I shook my head. "No, because I remember what it's like to be overlooked. Because I know what it means to be dismissed, to be underestimated. Every hire I make, every deal I sign, I ask myself if we are creating opportunity or just protecting privilege. That's why my company thrives. Because we don't build walls around our table. We build more chairs." His silence was answer enough. "You," I said, my voice sharp, "represent everything I built my company to fight against. Old money protecting old ideas. Doors locked tight to anyone who didn't inherit the key." He shifted, his confidence cracking. "That's not fair. Harrington Industries has provided job stability. Name one person on your board," I cut in, "who didn't graduate from an Ivy League school. Name one executive who grew up below the poverty line. Name one senior manager who had to work 3 jobs to pay for textbooks. You can't. Because for you, William, privilege is not just an advantage, it's a requirement." His face reddened. He looked like a man choking on truths he didn't want to admit. "The merger is dead," I said quietly. "Not because you insulted me, but because you revealed who you are. And now everyone will see it." He paled. "This will destroy us." "Then maybe it should." I stood walking toward the door, my heels clicking against the polished floor, like the final strokes of a gavel. "Wait." His voice cracked, desperate. "What about Quinn? You'll destroy his inheritance, his future." I froze. His words struck deep because Quinn was the one thing that complicated everything. My love for him was real, tender, fragile. He was nothing like his father. He had the strength of William's jawline, but the kindness of his mother's eyes. And though I could burn William's empire to ash, I could not bear the thought of Quinn becoming collateral damage. Slowly I turned back to William. My voice softened, but it did not lose its edge. "Quinn is brilliant, capable, strong. He doesn't need your inheritance to succeed. He can build his own. That's the difference between us. You see inheritance as destiny. I see it as a crutch." His jaw worked, clenching with unspoken rage. "He'll never forgive you," he spat. "Maybe not," I said softly. "But at least he'll know I had principles that couldn't be bought or intimidated. Can you say the same?" His silence was deafening. I left him there and returned to my office. Danielle was waiting with a stack of messages and a glimmer of amusement in her eyes. Fairchild wants to meet Monday morning, she said, and I may have leaked just enough for William to hear about it by this afternoon. Perfect, I replied. She hesitated, then added, Quinn is in your private office. My heart skipped. How long has he been there? About an hour. He called the main line asking for you. When I told him you were meeting with his father, he asked if he could wait. I gave him coffee and tissues. A lump formed in my throat as I made my way down the hallway. When I opened the door, I found Quinn curled up in my chair, his eyes red but dry, his body weary with a burden he hadn't chosen. Hi, he said softly. Hi, I whispered back. I heard what you told him, he said. Danielle let me watch on the feed. I sat on the edge of my desk, unsure of what to say. I think... His voice broke, then steadied. I think I've been a coward, letting him treat you that way, making excuses, hoping it would change. Quinn, no, let me finish. He stood moving closer, his hands trembling as he took mine. I've spent my whole life benefiting from his prejudices, never challenging them. And last night watching him, I was ashamed. Not of you, of him, and of myself. My chest tightened, tears threatening. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you'll have me, I want to build something new with you. Without his money, without his connections, without his conditional approval. I pulled him close, feeling the weight of his sincerity. Are you sure walking away from all of that, it's no small thing? He laughed, a sound both broken and beautiful. Zafira Cross, you just terminated a $2 billion merger because my father disrespected you. I think we'll figure out the money part. I kissed him, the taste of tears and courage mingling between us. For the first time in days, my heart felt less heavy. But even as love wrapped around me, a darker truth lingered in the back of my mind. William Harrington would not go quietly, and war had already begun. The city was still waking when the war truly began. By the time I reached my desk the next morning, Danielle had already placed 3 newspapers on the glass surface, each with my name printed in bold ink. Cross Technologies terminates Harrington merger. Rumors swirl about corporate culture. Clash is William Harrington losing his grip. I traced my fingers over the headlines, each one a bruise blossoming across his kingdom. Power. I'd learned isn't about titles or inheritance, it's about narrative. And right now, the narrative was mine. Danielle leaned against the doorframe, a mug of coffee in her hand. Bloomberg wants an interview. The Journal, too. They smell blood. Let them wait, I said. Let them circle. Her eyes sparkled. You're enjoying this, I sighed, setting down the paper. Enjoyment has nothing to do with it. This is about survival. He thought he could humiliate me in front of everyone who mattered to him. Now he'll learn what it means when the one you dismiss refuses to stay dismissed. The phone rang before I could take a sip of coffee. Danielle answered, her expression shifting from neutral to amused. It's William. Again. I gestured for her to put him through. Zafira, his voice barked down the line. Gone was the confident baritone from the dinner table. This was a man hoarse with rage and panic. We need to meet. We need to... We already met, I said evenly. This isn't a game, he snapped. You're jeopardizing billions of dollars. Do you have any idea? I cut in sharply, what it's like to be called garbage at your partner's family table? Do you know what it's like to carry humiliation like a brand seared into your skin while everyone looks away? This isn't about dollars, William. This is about respect. And you forfeited yours. He breathed heavily on the other end, the sound of a man cornered. We can fix this. I'll issue a public apology. I'll tell the press. Stop. My voice went cold. You can't buy your way out of this. You taught me something last night, that when someone shows you what they truly believe, you listen. You showed me who you are, and now I will show you who I am. I hung up before he could respond. Danielle whistled low. That was brutal. No, I corrected, that was honest. But honesty came at a cost. Quinn appeared later that afternoon, his usually calm demeanor shattered by conflict. He looked older, weighed down, like he had aged years in just days. Zafira, he began, his voice tight. The board is panicking. My father's been pacing like a caged animal. He thinks you're orchestrating a coup. Because I am, I admitted softly. His face paled. You're going after him directly. I'm giving his board a choice, I said. Evolve or perish. If they want survival, they'll remove him. Quinn ran a hand through his hair, frustration radiating from him. He's my father. Do you understand what that means? Watching you dismantle him, it feels like you're dismantling me too. The words cut deep, and for a moment guilt rose like bile in my throat, but I steadied myself, reaching for his hand. Quinn, I love you. But love doesn't mean sacrificing who I am. If I let this go, if I allow him to insult me without consequence, I lose more than dignity. I lose the foundation of everything I've built. Can you understand that? He pulled away, pacing the room. I do understand. And that's what terrifies me. You're unstoppable when you're like this. But the collateral damage, my mother, my sister do, they deserve to be burned in the fire between you and him. I swallowed hard because the truth was painful. No, they don't. But sometimes when a house is infested, you can't save every piece of furniture. Sometimes you have to burn it down and build something new. He closed his eyes, torn apart by loyalty stretched too thin. Quinn, I whispered, stepping closer. You are not your father. You are not his cruelty. You are the man who held my hand in secret when everyone told you to let go. You are the one person who saw me. Not the clothes, not the car, not the past. Me. Please don't confuse your bloodline with your identity. When he opened his eyes, I saw the battle raging inside him. But beneath it, I also saw something else: conviction. You're right, he said, his voice breaking. And that's why I can't let you fight him alone. The days that followed were a blur of strategy and warfare. Harrington Industries' stock price dipped as whispers spread. Anonymous sources carefully planted by Danielle spoke of toxic leadership and outdated practices. The press feasted, and every article chipped away at the once unshakable image of William Harrington. The board called an emergency meeting. Sources told me they were divided, some terrified of losing everything, others clinging to William's legacy like a life raft. That morning, as I prepared for my own meeting with Fairchild Corporation, Danielle entered with a knowing smile. He's in the lobby again. William, yes, and this time he's not shouting, he's begging. I almost laughed, but the sound caught in my throat. There was nothing humorous about a man groveling for the empire he thought was untouchable. Send him up, I said, but make him wait, again. Of course. An hour later, I entered the conference room to find him slumped in a chair, shoulders heavy, eyes bloodshot. The transformation was startling. He looked less like a titan and more like a man watching his world collapse in real time. Zafir, he said, standing weakly, please, this has gone too far. I crossed my arms. Has it? Or has it simply gone exactly as far as you pushed it? He flinched but pressed on. The board is restless. They're considering alternatives. If I lose control, if they remove me, that's not my problem, I said. That's the consequence of your actions. He leaned forward, desperation spilling from him. What do you want from me? Money. A public apology. Tell me what it will take to end this. I paused, the weight of the moment sinking in. This was the man who had humiliated me, who had sneered at my past. And now here he was, trembling in front of me, offering anything in exchange for mercy. But mercy had never been offered to me. What I want, I said slowly, is something you can't give. I want every child who grew up like I did to know they are not garbage. I want every boardroom in this city to understand that respect is not a luxury to be handed out to those with pedigrees. It is the bare minimum owed to anyone who has earned their place at the table. Can you give me that, William? His lips parted, but no words came. Then you can't give me what I want, I said, turning toward the door. His voice cracked behind me. You're destroying me. I stopped, my hand on the door frame. No, William. You destroyed yourself. I'm just pulling back the curtain. That night, I sat on my balcony again, the city sprawling beneath me, lights glittering like 1,000 watchful eyes. Quinn joined me, settling into the chair beside mine. Danielle told me about today, he said quietly. I nodded, sipping my scotch. He begged, but he still doesn't understand. He thinks respect is a currency you can purchase when it suits you. He doesn't realize it has to be earned every day. Quinn leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He's not going to surrender. You know that, right? He'll fight until the end. Good, I said, because so will I. He looked at me, then really looked at me. And for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that both frightened and comforted me. Not fear, not doubt, but belief. Not, I chose you, he whispered, and I'll keep choosing you, even if it means turning my back on him. My chest tightened, tears threatening again. Are you sure? Once this starts, there's no undoing it. No going back to the way things were. There's nothing to go back to, he said simply. The bridge burned the moment he called you garbage. I won't rebuild what was never worthy of us. I reached for his hand, holding it tight. The city stretched before us, vast and merciless. But for the first time, I felt not just like a survivor, but like a conqueror. Because I wasn't fighting for revenge alone anymore. I was fighting for us. By Monday morning, the war had moved from whispers in the press to the polished wood of the Harrington Industries boardroom. Danielle's sources fed me every detail. Executives who had once worshipped William's dominance were suddenly wary, their loyalty cracking under the weight of plummeting stock prices and scathing headlines. Shareholders demanded answers, employees whispered about instability, and clients threatened to withdraw contracts. For the first time in his life, William Harrington was no longer untouchable. I stood by my office window looking out at the skyline that had once intimidated me. Now it looked different, like a chessboard, every tower and light, a piece waiting to be moved. Danielle handed me a folder thick with notes. The board meets at 9 sharp, she said. They're divided, but there's a strong bloc pushing for a leadership change. Good, I said. Let them see what happens when arrogance blinds them. She hesitated, her usual confidence softened by concern. Zafira, if they oust him, you know what that means, don't you? It won't just be his downfall, it'll be Quinn's inheritance too. I closed the folder. My chest ached, but my voice was steady. I know. But Quinn deserves a life built on his own merit, not a throne of rot. At 9:15, the call came. Danielle put it on speaker, and the deep voice of a Harrington board member filled the room. Ms. Cross, this is Edward Lang. I hope you understand the severity of our situation. Mr. Harrington's leadership has been called into question. We'd like to explore alternatives. Alternatives. The word hung in the air, elegant and ruthless. I understand, I said. If your board seeks stability, I'm open to discussions, but my company will only entertain a merger with Harrington Industries under new leadership. Emphasis on new. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Edward said, That will not be easy. William is a formidable opponent. I smiled faintly. Then perhaps it's time to ask yourselves whether your loyalty is to him or to survival. That afternoon, Quinn came to see me. He looked pale, exhausted, his tie loosened, his hands restless. I was in the boardroom, he confessed, his voice raw. They tore him apart. Men who've nodded along with him for decades suddenly acted like they never believed in him. He kept fighting Zafira. I've never seen him so desperate. And when they suggested removing him, he looked at me. He paused, his throat tightening. Do you know what it feels like to watch your own father beg, with his eyes, for you to defend him? And do you know what it feels like to realize you can't? I stepped toward him, reaching for his hand. Quinn. I wanted to stand up, he continued, his voice breaking. I wanted to shout that he's still my father. But then I thought about you, about the way he humiliated you, about all the times I excused him because it was easier than confronting him. And I stayed silent. Tears welled in his eyes. I betrayed him. I cupped his face gently. No. You chose yourself. You chose us. That's not betrayal, it's courage. He leaned into my touch, closing his eyes. It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like loss. Sometimes I whispered loss is the first step toward freedom. The following morning, the world woke to headlines even more brutal than before. Harrington Board calls for emergency leadership vote. Investors push back against CEO's controversial comments. Is William Harrington finished? I sipped my coffee, slowly savoring the bitter strength. Danielle entered, her phone in hand. The vote is set for Friday. They're moving fast. My chest tightened. That soon? Yes. And if they oust him, they'll come to us immediately. They can't afford to let the company sink without a lifeline. I nodded. Then we make sure we're ready. Friday arrived like the slow toll of a funeral bell. By 10 a.m., the board had gathered in their gleaming conference room, the walls lined with oil portraits of men who believed they were immortal. At the head of the table sat William Harrington, jaw clenched, his once commanding presence reduced to brittle pride. I wasn't there, but Danielle's contact live-streamed the meeting to me through a secure link. On my office screen, I watched history fracture. The vote was swift. Names were called, voices recorded. One by one, the board members who had once bowed to William now raised their hands to strip him of power. The camera caught his face as the majority tipped against him. Rage, disbelief, and beneath it all a hollow grief. He wasn't just losing a company, he was losing his identity. When the final count was read, William rose, his voice trembling with fury. "You think you can erase me? I built this company, I bled for it, you'll regret this." But the board didn't flinch. They had already moved on. Quinn was the first to call me after the vote. His voice was heavy with sorrow. "It's done. He's out." I closed my eyes, breathing deeply. "And the board will reach out to you within the hour. They want the merger under new terms." His silence lingered. Then he added, I saw his face, Saphira. I'll never forget it. He looked at me like I was the one holding the knife. Tears threatened, but I held them back. "I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize. You were right. He made his choices. But knowing that doesn't make it easier." "No," I whispered. "It never does." By noon, the call came from Edward Lang again. His tone was brisk, professional, devoid of sentiment. "Ms. Cross, the board has reached a unanimous decision. We wish to move forward with Cross Technologies, effective immediately. William Harrington is no longer CEO. We trust you'll find these conditions acceptable." "Yes," I said, my voice firm. "We'll arrange terms by next week." Danielle nearly collapsed into a chair, exhaling deeply. "It's done. He's gone." But as the words settled, I felt no triumph, only a strange, aching silence. That evening, Quinn came to my penthouse. He looked hollow, his usual warmth dimmed. "I went to see him," he admitted. He didn't speak, not a word, just sat there staring at the fireplace like it might give him answers. My throat tightened. "And what did you say?" "I told him I loved him, that I always would, but that I couldn't follow him down this path anymore." His eyes met mine, glassy with tears. He didn't even look at me, Zafira, not once. I held him as he broke, feeling his sobs shake through both of us. In that moment, I realized the true cost of revenge. It wasn't the billions lost, the headlines printed, the boardrooms overturned. It was this, the breaking of a son's heart. Days passed and the world adjusted to its new order. The press hailed the merger as a bold move, a generational shift, a victory for progress. Harrington Industries was reborn under new leadership, stripped of its old arrogance. Cross Technologies stood at the helm, stronger than ever. But in the quiet hours when the noise of the world faded, I sat with Quinn and felt the lingering ache of what we had lost. Not wealth, not titles, but family, however flawed it had been. One night, as we lay in silence, Quinn whispered, "Do you ever wonder if we went too far?" I turned toward him, brushing his hair back from his face. "Every day." But then I remember that moment at dinner, his words, his contempt. If I had stayed silent, if I had let it pass, I would have betrayed myself. And I can't live with that. He nodded, eyes glistening. "Neither can I." The war was won. But victory did not taste sweet. It tasted like ashes, like survival, like the echo of battles fought long before William Harrington ever knew my name. The storm had passed, but the ruins still smoked. By the following Monday, William Harrington's name had been stripped from every press release. His portrait, once hanging in the gilded hallway of Harrington Industries headquarters, was quietly removed. Employees whispered about it in the break room, their voices a mixture of shock and satisfaction. Titans don't fall gracefully, they crash, they shatter, and the sound echoes through every corridor. By Tuesday, the merger was official. Cross Technologies and Harrington Industries announced a historic partnership for innovation and inclusivity, the kind of headline that soothed investors and made journalists salivate. On the surface, it was business, but for me, it was vindication. By Wednesday, Quinn had accepted a new role, head of strategic development under the restructured company. He declined his father's attempts to fund a rival venture out of spite. Instead, he chose to stand beside me, not behind me, not beneath me, but beside me. And by Thursday, William Harrington had learned the most expensive lesson of his life. Never call someone garbage unless you're prepared to be thrown out with it. 6 months later, Quinn and I were engaged. We didn't choose a grand cathedral or a ballroom for our wedding. Instead, we planned a small ceremony by the ocean, far from the country club tables and velvet curtains, where his father's approval once dictated the rules of belonging. Rachel, his mother, called me every week now. Her voice was softer these days, stripped of the forced elegance she once wore like armor. She apologized often, not for William, but for herself, for the silence, for the years she chose comfort over confrontation. Slowly, painfully, We began to rebuild something fragile but real. His sister Patricia wrote a song about it all. A clumsy ballad filled with too many metaphors, but her heart was in it. When she sent me the lyrics, I cried not because the song was good, but because she was finally writing about truth instead of illusions. As for William, he never called. Not once. Quinn tried, of course. He drove out to the old estate, knocked on the heavy oak door, sat in the same dining room where I had once been branded as street garbage. But William wouldn't see him. "I'll never forgive her," he told Quinn through the door. And Quinn, to his eternal credit, replied, "Then you'll never know peace." Sometimes at night, I thought about him. I thought about the way he looked across that long table, how his contempt had lit a fuse that ended in his own destruction. I wondered if he replayed it in his mind, if he realized that one careless insult had cost him the empire he thought unshakable. And sometimes I thought about myself, not the woman who stood victorious in a skyscraper office, but the girl who once sat on the edge of a foster bed staring at torn shoes, promising herself she would matter one day. I wanted to tell her, "You do. You always did. They just couldn't see it yet." On the day Quinn and I announced our engagement, I stood in front of a mirror in my apartment staring at the diamond ring he had placed on my finger. It wasn't enormous, not the gaudy statement piece his father would have chosen. It was simple, elegant, carved with intention rather than excess. Quinn came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. His voice was quiet, filled with something softer than triumph. "Do you ever regret it?" "Which part?" I asked. Fighting him, taking it this far. I stared at our reflection, the daughter of poverty, the son of privilege, bound together in something neither of us had inherited. "No," I said finally, "because this was never just about him. This was about me reclaiming the right to exist without apology. About proving that no one decides my worth but me." Quinn kissed my temple, then I guess he was wrong. "About what?" "You're not garbage," he whispered. "You're gold." The world forgot William Harrington faster than I expected. New CEOs rose, new scandals, broke new headlines, stole his spotlight. But I didn't forget. I couldn't. Because his voice still lived in the cracks of my memory, the echo of a lifetime of being dismissed. And yet, strangely, I wasn't bitter anymore. Because in destroying him, I hadn't just avenged myself, I had freed myself. I had silenced not only his voice, but every echo of the past that told me I wasn't enough. When I stood on that beach, months later, barefoot in the sand with Quinn's hands in mine, I realized something I had never known at 13, at 16, at 22, when I worked nights to keep a dream alive. I realized that respect isn't given by men at dining tables. It isn't granted by fathers, CEOs, or boardrooms. Respect is built through scars, through survival, through relentless refusal to disappear. I wasn't garbage, I never had been. And for anyone listening, anyone who has ever been told they are less than, I'll tell you what I learned. You are not defined by the voices that belittle you. You are defined by how loudly you choose to rise when they try to silence you. So if you're watching this, if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been branded as not enough, remember this story. Remember that sometimes the garbage takes itself out, and sometimes it takes everything else with it. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If my story spoke to you, if it reminded you of your own strength, then please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories like this, and leave me a comment. Tell me, have you ever been underestimated, and what did it teach you? Your voice matters, your story matters, and no one, not even kings at gilded tables, gets to tell you otherwise.